eyes, my friend.
You are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor.
You are listening to The Review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Review. It's the Online Sports Guys College Football Podcast featuring us, the Online Sports Guys. This week, it's only two of us, at least right now. Brother Wilkie here on one side of the screen, me, OSG Phil, on the other. OSG Nelson, he is currently on assignment working a soccer match for our other podcast, our Soccer Down Here shows.
Yeah, don't piss off the soccer fans.
Yeah, that would be bad. They can be vicious, those soccer folks.
Yes, they can. They can be violent.
And we're hoping that OSG J-Dub will chime in here at some point within the next hour while we talk about everything going on in the great big wide wonderful world of college football. And Wilkie, I guess we might as well start with I'm not sure if I would call it the biggest, but I would certainly call us one of the strangest stories that's come out this week, and that's that the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big Ten are all talking about a strategic alignment or alliance, or let's all be friends. What is this?
Kind of like the Allies of World War II.
Mm-hmm.
That would put the SEC as the axis of evil, but I don't want to put that label on the SEC. But obviously, it's the reaction to what the SEC announced when they brought in Texas and Oklahoma.
The Rebel Alliance and the SEC could be the evil. They can be the Empire.
Whatever. If you want to do the Star Wars reference, that's fine too. But I mean, it's got to be a reaction to that. And, first of all, I'm looking at the Big 12. I mean, that doesn't bode well for them either, knowing that these three conferences are going to form an alliance while you're kind of out on your own island.
Bob Bowlesby's at the door knocking, and they're saying, "Who dis?"
Yeah. When I saw that, there's not a whole lot of information as to how it's going to work, what the plan is. It's just, we're going to form an alliance. And so all you can do is really speculate and brainstorm about what they're going to do. And the first thing I've thought of is, okay, you've got a Pac-12 that's kind of media-wise tried to start their own network. It just hasn't worked. And they've got partnerships with Fox Sports and ESPN. Big Ten the Fox invested heavily in the Big Ten as a partner in their own network. They have the A games, I guess, to get the first choice, and ESPN's also a partner. And then you got the ACC that's being invested heavily by ESPN to start their own network, and basically has just gone with the four-letter for their entire media platforms. So if you're going to form an alliance like this, well, how's that going to make those people happy? Big Ten probably in a better position here because of their alliance with Fox, because that's the only focus they have. And probably the Pac-12 too, this probably serves them well too. But if you're an ACC school and you want to be a part of this alliance, what does that say about how the ACC network is going and what the powers that be think about the long-term future of that network? Let's face it. Roy Williams is no longer the head coach of North Carolina men's basketball. You got Mike Krzyzewski's going away after this year. That's the cash cow. The big attraction to the ACC network is men's basketball and the star power of the coaches. You don't have that kind of depth in ACC football. You got some great Olympic sports, but that just doesn't pay the bill. So that's my first reaction is, how is that going to work? And is this alliance going to negotiate their own television contract with another network, whether if it's Fox or NBC or CBS, or maybe a combination of that, more than one? So have the people that want to do this alliance thought it through because I think there will be. I mean, if this comes to fruition, yeah, I think there'll be big bucks involved.
Oh yeah.
But there's going to be lawsuits galore. You think?
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, that's one of those things that I could easily see there being an agreement on. I mean, while ESPN basically owns almost all of college football, they've still got only X amount of places that they can put the programming, and which opens the door for Fox to still run their Pac-12 game or their Big Ten game. We're talking what? 12. The Pac-12 has what? 14 teams.
No, Pac-12 is 12.
Pac-12 has 12. The Big Ten has
14.
14, and the ACC has 14. So
15 if you count Notre Dame.
Well, yeah, 14 and a half.
Yeah.
And they have their own network, which is a whole separate conversation.
Right.
But we're talking 40 teams. The question is, how much would they mix? If they don't mix all the way through, then everybody gets their thing, and it's just a matter of who's playing who on a given week.
Right. But how is it going to be structured? You know, I ran into an interesting comment from the former Clemson president, Jim Barker. He was on the Clemson Tiger podcast. And basically what he's talking about is the alliance being explored by the ACC, Big Ten, and Pac-12 could include Atlantic and Pacific divisions, with the winner of those two divisions playing for a conference championship. And there's maybe a number of intra-divisional games during the course of the regular season. So you put two conferences together and you begin to get in the driver's seat as opposed to just responding to something somebody else is doing. So in other words, you kind of melt those two conferences into some kind of super galactic conference, I guess, with multiple divisions, almost like what you see in the NFL, with a Pacific Conference and Atlantic Conference, and you've got divisions within those, wild cards, and and that would be kind of crazy, but it probably would work. In fact, you could have a playoff within a playoff almost.
You could have multiple levels if you so chose.
Yeah, which would just it'd put the ultimate death nail into the bowl system, that's for sure.
Not that that's a bad thing, but it's a separate conversation.
Right. So I'm interested to see how this thing gathers steam, especially as we bring in the full comprehension of what the SEC has now with Oklahoma and Texas coming into the mix in 2025. You know, you're talking about a conference in the SEC as a compelling matchup and a rivalry game practically every week, which is great for the TV partners and great for the audience. And that's where the other conferences are going to have to respond. The Big Ten, to me, is the only one that can, because they do have compelling games and they cornered the market in rivalries and trophy games. But they probably won't have even the regional interest that SEC games tend to have.
They don't have the same depth in that conference.
Right. On a regional level. I mean, Illinois Northwestern isn't going to excite anybody in Happy Valley or in Columbus, Ohio, like Mississippi State's going to do here, because alums are all over in Metro Atlanta and throughout the South. So I can see why they're doing it, because they need to have compelling matchups every week to get the numbers that they need to have, the eyeballs they need to have to be able to pay their bills.
Yeah, and that, which leads me to a kind of a follow-up question. I'm curious just how far along this conversation is. Was it something that was just kind of tossed around while the three of them sat in a room talking about what happened, what the SEC is doing, or did they just say, hey, we need to come up with a plan to counter this? Or is it just like, hey, wonder what would happen if we all kind of combined our forces to see if we can make our own little super conference just like the SEC did? I mean, is this the part that's not really been made clear is just how far along this conversation is. They may not have even gotten as far as saying, let's split this up, X, Y, and Z leagues and do this, and we can negotiate our new TV deal and so on and so forth. Do we really know that?
Well, you think there was some instant reaction when the SEC announced, or when the rumors started, about Texas and Oklahoma joining the league, and a week later it was confirmed. There's some smart college administrators in those three leagues. And I think the smart guys got together and said, we need to react to this or come up with something, some kind of counter to the SEC. Because in my opinion, the SEC is not done. I think they're still going after people. And I think there's a certain region in the country is where they want to penetrate. We'll save that for another podcast. And I think these smart college administrators know that the SEC is trying to lap the field, and I guess is the best way to put it, with football. And don't discount the other sports too, especially men's basketball, because the SEC has made a huge push into that sport, hiring some really good coaches, building some really fantastic facilities. So they don't want to be just Kentucky and everybody else anymore. They want to be on that national stage because that is a revenue producing sport. And the tournament, you can get some great supplementary dollars in SEC terms into, from the NCAA tournament appearances as you advance. So I've always thought that's one of the motives from the SEC as well. But getting back to football, there's some smart guys that know that they've got to come up with something, because there's some nervous people. And I think this is a big test for Jim Phillips, the new commissioner of the ACC,
Who caught a lot of heat for what he did, for how he handled the pandemic last year.
Right.
Backlash on that was not good.
Well, he's got to figure out, I mean, what a honeymoon period he's having right now. I mean, the alliance with ESPN goes to 2036, I believe. So you've got that. You've got your own network to think about. But really, it's the athletic directors that are going to come up with these ideas, and the university presidents. And obviously, they're going to increase their revenue. But if this can really increase their revenue, there's going to have to be some negotiations going on with that conference and with the ESPN. So I think that puts the ACC in a very precarious position as far as their future, because I think publicly they've said they're safe. They don't feel any defections. Privately, I think they're a little nervous, especially when the rumors of Clemson and Florida State being approached, which were false.
Yeah.
But it's out there, and people are thinking about that. And I just think it puts them in a very precarious spot for their future.
Yeah, it does. And it makes me curious too. What are you thinking if you're Greg Sankey and you sit back and you realize, okay, we made the first move by poaching Texas and Oklahoma, and now everybody wants to gang up against us. Are we looking at a world here potentially where we're going to have one super conference versus the other super conference, and that's going to be big time, top level college football?
That is interesting. My feeling, as far as Sankey and the position that he's put the SEC in, is, he knows football is the cash cow. He knows that, okay, adding Texas and Oklahoma, two powerhouse football programs, puts the SEC in a level beyond elite. So I really don't think he really thinks about how it's affecting the other conferences. He's got 14 university presidents to answer to, and then 16 in 4 years, who, with the exception of Vanderbilt, every year fill their stadiums, pretty much. Even if you have a 3 and 9 year, well, practically every SEC school is going to fill their stadium. And if they don't with their home fans, the traveling team's going to come in and take those seats. So
Right.
they're going to
Vanderbilt
make their money somewhere, and they're going to get the sponsorships.
and Vanderbilt,
So,
all the jokes. Vanderbilt's still competitive in basketball. They're just not in baseball.
well,
In
right,
the
but
sports, it's
we're in
just
the
not
football
football.
context here. So, but yeah, I think that's I don't think he really has. I don't want to say he really doesn't care about what the other leagues do, but I think his interest is the SEC and trying to maximize their profit potential and what can he do. He made the first move. It was bold, very secretive, which I think was kind of amazing in the world of social media that happened.
Yeah.
And so, but the counter, I think you've got, like I said a few minutes ago, you got some really smart administrators in the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and the ACC, and they're making their stand. They're making their move to protect their assets. Again, I just think with the ACC, I just think it puts them in a precarious position right now with having their own network launched 2 years ago, and now this. Timing's everything in business, and was the timing too late for that league to start their own network? And now with these dramatic shifts with name and licensing and free agency in college athletics, and now this, it just puts them in a tough spot.
Really kind of makes me wonder that if that what I said a little bit earlier might actually be where this is going. I mean, we're talking about almost all what you're talking about six, almost 60 teams basically separating themselves from everybody else in college football, which is something we've talked about in the past, that this is more or less the direction that things were heading. We just, the way we envisioned it when we talked about it the last time on the show, we were thinking it was going to be with all five of these power conferences breaking off and doing their own thing. I don't think we're going to have a power five much longer. If this is the route we're going, it may be a power two. And I wouldn't rule out the possibility that we end up seeing the world, the rest of the world in the SEC, those two super conferences becoming one. And then we're still at that point where we've got all those Power Five schools are in one big conference, and that's where college football is. We've got that level, we've got the secondary level, which is the group of five teams, and then everything below that. To me, that's what this smells like a little bit.
Yeah, I think we thought that it was going to be like this, but I think we thought maybe when the contracts were up in 2036 and the mid 30s, that's when we're going to start seeing more movement toward the separation. But just with, again, who knew that we were going to have transfer portal, and who knew we were going to have name, like, image, and likeness, and that was going to go the way it did. And then now with the SEC making their bold move, as far as the alliances, I think this is going to happen quicker than we anticipated. By the time we get to 2025, we may have the SEC and the Super Galactic Conference. And, don't discount the American either. I mean, they always say Power Six, and there's some attractive schools there. And if they absorb the remnants of the Big 12, probably minus Kansas and Iowa State, because I imagine if anything happens, they're gonna at least try to get into the Big Ten. But who knows? I mean, they're going to want to be in some kind of alliance as well, or maybe want to play in the SEC sandbox. I don't know. I mean, we could go on for hours talking about this, about how this could play out. But again, I think there's a lot of scenarios here that are going to play out that we kind of expected maybe when we hung up the microphone and retired and kind of watched it all after our long careers, but it may be happening sooner than we ever thought.
Yeah, and that's the part I think that amazes me. It's like, okay, we know things are changing, the world's changing, technology is changing, everything else is changing at a super fast pace. This we thought was kind of locked in due to programming, broadcast rights, network rights, and all that stuff. But really, none of that stuff's stopping it now at this point. It's moving so fast that by the time everything else catches up, it's already going to be done. At this point, let me do the gratuitous promotion here. If you're watching us, you probably see us on YouTube. Look us up at OSG Sports. Like what we're doing, subscribe to our channel. We'd love to have you. We are on social media as well, again, at OSG Sports, both on Facebook and Twitter. You can download our phone app, go to the Google Play Store, go to the Apple Store, look up OSG Sports. We're there. I guess the short version of that is I'm telling you, if you look up OSG Sports online, there's a good chance something's going to come up with us next to it. And Wilkie, we talked for the first 20 minutes or so here about galactic realignment and the shift of the Empire versus the Rebel Alliance. Second part of this first block in the second quarter here, I guess you could call it, I want to talk about college football previews. And last week we hit the ACC, we hit the American Athletic Conference. We talked about the Big Ten and all the things going on with them. Let's preview the Big Ten here, shall we, before we go to break? And everything Big Ten's got to start with one school, the school that's dominated pretty much everything for the last several years, and that's Ohio State, who, much like Clemson, much like Alabama, much like Georgia, much like Oklahoma, and a few other odds and ends schools, they don't lose talent, they just reload. And the Buckeyes, really, until somebody knocks them off the perch, that's your prohibitive favorite going in the Big Ten this year, isn't it?
Very much so. I mean, they're the most talented team in the Big Ten, even though they're having I heard someone reference as a mini rebuilding year in Columbus. And yeah, I mean, there's some parts that need to be addressed, but again, you mentioned that they reload. They pick whoever they want. They have their choices of 5 stars. They're an overwhelming favorite to win the Big Ten East. I tell you, when you look at their schedule, though, they got to get things right off the bat, because you're opening at Minnesota, and Minnesota, probably middle of the road West team, but
never a pushover.
Never a pushover, and it's week 1, and week 1 of college football is real nervous for me because anything can happen. And then after that, you host Oregon, and Oregon's going to be really good this year, the class of the Pac-12. So right off the bat, on September 2nd at Minnesota and September 11th hosting Oregon, you've got 2 toughies right off the bat. You go 2-0, then you deserve to run the table. Even at 1-1, I don't think that's going to really affect Ohio State that much. But the possibility of 0-2, it's there. But I just think Ohio State's too strong. I don't think it'll be that rough of a start. After that, I mean, really, they host Penn State, and that's really I think their challenger in the East. And after that, they hang on.
It's okay.
They do go to Michigan, but they own Michigan right now. So schedule-wise, after you get through those first 2 teams, you kind of like their chances.
Yeah, but I think the part that's going to be interesting is they, for the first time in a long time, they really don't have the quarterback room settled. They don't really know who's going to be the guy that takes over from Justin Fields, who took over from Dwayne Haskins, who took over from JT Barrett, and so on and so forth down the line. This is really the first year it's toss-up as to who's going to be under center in week 1. And that, to start off with a tough stretch of your first 3 games, that would make me kind of wonder.
Well, you got a redshirt freshman that has waited his turn. That's Jack Miller.
Mm-hmm.
And He's not bad. Then you got a hot shot recruit in CJ Stroud, who's really kind of the favorite to win the job. But, he's not that experienced, but he's uber talented. So, sometimes you got to go with the talent. And then you've got a kid that should be a high school senior this year, Quinn Ewers, who could be in the mix as well. But, I don't know about a guy who should have been a high school senior leading your team in Minneapolis on September 2nd. But you're right. They're a little unsettled there. That's going to be a key as far as game one. Who's the guy that can lead that team and be the leader? Like I say, I think CJ Stroud is probably the leader in the clubhouse, and he can make things happen.
Mm-hmm.
But and they've got a pretty good stable of running backs with they got some excellent receivers. I mean,
Yeah,
the
Chris
thing
Olave
about
comes back.
yeah,
They've got some
Master Teague is back, and he's a serviceable running back. Probably needs to put some big numbers up to settle that side, that part of the offense, because Trey Sermon was such a big asset for them last year. And they had some issues on defense last year, especially on third down stops. So they got to address that, and that could rear its ugly head. But again, it's Ohio State. I mean, they've got the best talent. They got the most 5 stars. They're going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
I can see them going 2-0 in that stretch of games
Right
to
out of
begin
the
the
block.
season. Because after that, other than the fact that they've got Penn State coming to the Horseshoe, that's the only one I can see, barring any kind of injury. That's the thing about football. I mean, you don't know if you're going to have a devastating injury to one of your key players, especially on defense. I think they're a little thin depth-wise there, but it's Ohio State. I mean, to me, they're my pick to win the Big Ten. And, I mean, I really don't think it's all that close either.
Well, speaking of Penn State, they're one team that does have their quarterback room at least a little bit settled going into the season, as Sean Clifford returns yet again for another year in Happy Valley. Penn State, if nothing else under James Franklin, they've been pretty consistent. They win games. They win a lot of games. But are they a notch below Ohio State, or do they have the chance to knock them off? I mean, they were sloppy coming out of the gates last year. They did not adjust well once games started playing again. The 4-5 mark being a prime indicator of that. But there's some talent there as well. I mean, he's got a full receiver room and a good offensive line in front of him, he being Clifford. Could this be the year that Penn State sneaks up and takes at least a quick leapfrog over Ohio State?
I think what helped Penn State last year was how they closed the season, because it was an awful start. And
Yeah.
it began with the Indiana game, which they feel that they got screwed over. Uh, we argued about that last year, so
Yeah,
we won't revisit
Indiana's
that.
tough. Indiana ended up being a pretty tough team last year, so that wasn't that huge.
No, it wasn't, but it's just the way they lost. And, they had defections and COVID issues last year, too.
Mhm.
Now, to me, Penn State, other than Ohio State, has the best talent in the Big Ten. Unfortunately, they've got Ohio State in their conference and in their division, and that's going to be really tough for Penn State to overcome. I like some of the parts. James Franklin is, they were a young team last year, and again, the way they finished last year, I think is going to bode well for them heading into this year. And now they start the season at Wisconsin, so we're going to know pretty quickly just how good this Penn State team is, and where Sean Clifford is as far as his mentality and his physicality for this year. You also got Auburn coming your way 2 weeks later. I think those are two big tests for Penn State.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Probably one they'll pass, one of them they won't. They're lucky to have Ball State in between, because I think they're gonna expend a lot of energy in that Wisconsin game, and Ball State may be the breather they need to. Although it's at home, it's at Happy Valley for Auburn, and then you host Indiana. You don't think that's marked on their schedule? You don't think that might be a little beatdown? that
Good
Penn
hit.
State wants. But after that, you go to Iowa. And I really like that Iowa team before you get your open date. So really 4 tough games to open the season into mid-October. And then you go to Columbus to play Ohio State on October 30th. So, and then they host Michigan. So for a team that's going to be a little more on the upward side this year, there's some games on the schedule that could come up and bite them on the backside. Fortunately for James Franklin and the Nittany Lions, they're a much more talented team than they were last year. But that game, October 30th in Columbus, I hope that's a appointment television, because if Penn State is within the mix of the Eastern Championship, and they've gotten a few wins in those tough games, and let's say they've run the table on those games, then you got the colossal matchup the Big Ten needs, hopefully for a primetime game that can, and I'd give Penn State a puncher's chance by then.
Absolutely. Anybody else in the Big Ten East that really jumps off the page to you? I find it interesting that Michigan, according to most of the things that I have read, may not be the competitor that they would like to be, and it could be potentially the end of Coach Kaki. And there's some depth in that Big Ten East. I mean, there's some good football teams with Indiana still there and going to be a competitive team as long as Michael Penix is healthy. Rutgers may not be on the same level as the other teams, but they showed improvement under Greg Schiano as well. And Maryland wasn't bad. Any of those teams kind of jump off to you, or are they all kind of the by the way teams?
Michigan really intrigues me because Alex Bowman is there, and he was having a decent career at Texas Tech before injuries really kind of slowed him down. And I'm just wondering, I think he's going to be an excellent fit for that offense at Michigan. I think he's really the type of quarterback that Jim Harbaugh has wanted all along in that offense. Not very mobile, but throws a great deep ball. And Michigan does still have a pretty damn good receiving core. The defense last year was just not very good,
No.
and that has to be addressed. But Michigan still has talent, and I just wonder if the want to is there in Michigan right now. Is it all right? We got to do this for Coach Harbaugh, or will the wheels come off the rails pretty quickly? Lucky for Michigan, the open hosting Western Michigan. That'll be a nice little ramp up for them as they host Washington. That's the key game for me because the Huskies are the Huskies. They're going to bring it to the Wolverines, and that's always a game, especially in the last 20 years, that Michigan just seems to just to come off the rails then. Usually about that time of year where it's an inexplainable loss or a loss that maybe should have been a win at Michigan Stadium. But the schedule somewhat favors Michigan this year. They have to go to Wisconsin. They have to go to Penn State. And they host Ohio State. The key to me is, even if they're having it maybe a 9-win type of year, an 8-win type of year, it's to the point where they have to beat Ohio State this year.
Yeah.
And again, Michigan still has talent. It's just whether they can be coached up to win those type of games. So I'm more on a buy with Michigan right now, because of the improvements they've made. But this has to be that type of year for Michigan, and they have to beat Ohio State. Rutgers is going to be a team that's going to beat somebody they're not supposed to beat. They're probably going to sneak into the bowl picture. Greg Schiano is doing his best to upgrade the talent. He's getting the most out of that group of guys, and they're going to beat somebody they're not supposed to beat. Rutgers, no, sorry, not Rutgers, Maryland. I can't tell you how Maryland's going to be. I mean, I like some of the players they have, but I just, depth is an issue, and I mean it's Maryland. They just can't seem to get over the hump. And with Talia Tagovailoa there, he made some really bad decisions last year, threw some really bad interceptions. Um, we'll see what happens there, but I don't know. That's a team that could go 3-9 and could go what 6-6, 7-5.
Yeah.
Michigan State, um, they couldn't convert on third downs last year, and they couldn't stop anybody on third downs last year. And Mel Tucker has now decided he's going to be defensive coordinator too. I think it's going to be a long year in East Lansing.
Yeah. And real quick here before we wrap things up on the first half of the show, to me, just looking at the Big Ten West, it looks like it always looks. Big teams, tall, strong, physical teams that run the ball a lot, and at the end of the day, end up losing to the Eastern champion. Am I wrong in that read, or is that how it kind of looks to you? The teams all look basically the same, with the exception of maybe Nebraska, who is more of a speed team, and they don't look like they're quite at the same level as even the top four teams in the East, or in the West, I'm sorry.
See, I'm kind of high on Nebraska this year because I think the pressure is kind of off of them a little bit. Tanner Martinez is going to have, I mean, he's had a few years under his belt. He's going to be fine. He's really the guy that makes that offense go. So I'm not saying they're going to win the division,
Oh, no.
but I think they're on the way to being somewhat of Nebraska again. I'm not sure if they're ever going to be like they were when we were growing up um, with Tom Osborne, but I think they're on the upward trajectory right now. They haven't had a winning season. I want to say 4 years. When's the last time we've talked about Nebraska like that? To me, the team I like a lot is Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
They've got some players on defense, and they've got, I mean, to me, and I've expressed this many times in football. I love the interior lines, and when you have strong interior lines, you're going to win a lot of ball games, and Iowa has that, and they've got some really, really good, um, really good offensive players as well. So they were picked to finish second in the Big Ten West behind Wisconsin. And there's some things I like about Wisconsin too, but I really like the Hawkeyes this year to win the West. Now, they'll hang with Ohio State, maybe surprise a little bit, but I think your assessment is right. Now, Iowa does open with Indiana at home and then play for the Cyhawk at Iowa State. That's a pretty tough start for the Hawkeyes. They do not get Michigan, Ohio State. They get Penn State, but that's at home. So, if you get through that 2-0, that first two games 2-0, I think Iowa could be the challenger for Ohio State. I just really like the way that team's made up.
Yeah, I still maintain probably the best three, maybe four teams in the Big Ten are all in the East. I could be wrong there. I still think Wisconsin will end up winning the West because it's kind of what they do, and they've got the depth and an experienced quarterback in Graham Mertz. But at the end of the day, I don't think Wisconsin, Iowa, or really anybody else is going to knock down Ohio State, or if it's Penn State, either one of those teams when it comes down to the conference championship game. We've kind of hit the Big 12, the Big 10, and we've talked about galactic realignment. Coming up in the second half of the show, we're going to talk more college football previews, this time with the Big 12, and we may dip our toes a little bit into Conference USA as we continue a somewhat alphabetical parade down the list of conferences before kickoff here in just a couple of weeks. Yes, I said that's right. College football season is almost upon us. All that and more when we come back for the second half of the review. You are listening to the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
The OSG app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Download the OSG app today.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Congratulations, you have made it to the second half of the show. This is The Review. It's the Online Sports Guys College Football Podcast featuring us, the Online Sports Guys. Brother Wilkie over here on one screen, me, OSG Phil on the other. OSG Nelson off on assignment for our soccer show, working the Atlanta United game today. And Brother J-Dub had some business to take care of. Hopefully he'll be back with us next week as well. If you stuck around for the first half of the show, you got to hear Wilkie and I talk a lot about intergalactic realignment and intergalactic funk, plus a little bit of a preview of the Big Ten as we march towards the countdown to kickoff of the college football season of 2021. We'll continue on that theme of intergalactic previews. This time we're going to lead up to talking about the Big 12, or at least the remnants thereof.
They're still playing football?
They're still playing football, despite Texas and Oklahoma basically saying, pledging their allegiance to the SEC. They're still part of the Big 12, at least for this season. And really the conversation in the Big 12 kind of starts with those two teams. Oklahoma's got...
Well, some people in Ames, Iowa will probably...
disagree with that.
Disagree with you, yes.
But Oklahoma, if not the winner, the runner-up in this conference for as long as I can remember, or at least as long as I can short-term remember. And at the end of the day, they probably bring back the guy best suited to lead them to another chance at a title, and that's quarterback Spencer Rattler, who suffered some growing pains in 2020. But, man, by the end of the season, it really kicked into gear for him.
Yeah, first 3 weeks, he was deer in the headlights. Mm-hmm. But he overcame that pretty quickly. He's the best quarterback in the Big 12 as far as talent, as far as skill level. And, well, so what's new in Oklahoma with the Lincoln Riley offense? All you do is win Heisman's with your quarterback. And, he's going to be on that short list for the Heisman Trophy. And Oklahoma is probably got the best talented athletes on their in the Big 12. And then schedule-wise, you look at it, I mean, your first 3 games are at Tulane, so they get a trip to New Orleans out of it, hosting Western Carolina. And this is what I like, because the Cornhuskers of Nebraska come into Memorial Stadium September 18th. So I'm excited to see Oklahoma, Nebraska play again. It's going to be odd to see them play in late September rather than on Thanksgiving weekend, which I grew up watching. This is one of the great rivalries I grew up watching. So I'm a little excited about that.
If you're Nike or Under Armour or whoever outfits those teams, does that not call for retro uniforms?
I'm not sure Nebraska's ever changed their uniforms in the past 50 years. And I'm not sure Oklahoma has either, but I'm hoping that somewhere on the sideline, Tom Osborne and Barry Switzer are around and sharing old war stories, and because that'd be kind of cool to see those two back at it, both in their mid 80s now and somewhat still in good health. So I think that's going to be worth the price of admission to me. Really, it's not until the Texas game at the Red River Shootout in October for Oklahoma actually plays somebody. Now Nebraska will probably give them a game and be fired up. But, I mean, come on, Oklahoma's better than Nebraska right now. Um, you know, I mean, that's really the first test they're going to have, and then it's really not until, well, maybe Baylor will give them a game because it's at Waco, but you really don't have anything until at the end of the season when the Sooners host Iowa State on November 20th, and then go down over to Stillwater for Bedlam a week later. So really, there's just 3 games that Oklahoma really has to worry about,
Mm-hmm.
and the last 2 are not until the end of the season. And by that time, Spencer Rattler is going to be primed, and that entire offense and that defense is much better. Alex Grinch has made a great difference in that defense.
And that's always
It's
been the question with Oklahoma. It's not scoring points, is can they stop the opponent from scoring?
exactly. And for me, Oklahoma will be in the title game. Now, who are they going to play? Well, I tend to think it's going to be a rematch of last year. I mean, Iowa State,
Is
look,
loaded.
they had a chance to win their first conference title in 108 years, back when they were in the Missouri Valley, and
Almost the entire offense comes back.
yeah, and then including in that offense is Brock Purdy,
Mm-hmm.
who he's probably not the most talented guy out there. He throws a nice ball, but I mean, he's a guy that just wins games, and he's like the heart and soul of that Iowa State team. I'm excited to see Breece Hall again.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to be a Heisman Trophy candidate if he has this type of year he had last year and stays healthy. And I think Iowa State's a team that's on a mission because they didn't get it done last year, and it's been over 100 years since the Cyclones have been able to hoist a trophy into the conference championship, into the trophy case. And you look at their schedule. I mean, really, you host Northern Iowa, and then you play Iowa in the Cyhawk game. Both those games on the road or at home in Ames. You take a road trip to Vegas, win. You go to Baylor, might be a toughie. And then you've got Oklahoma State. You host Oklahoma State. West Virginia is going to be a little bit of maybe a white knuckler. You host Texas, and Iowa State's had Texas's number the last few years. But it's really that mid-November stretch when they have to go to Texas Tech on November 13th. It'll be after the Texas game. If you're looking for a trap game, that might be it because it's before the Oklahoma game in Norman. And if you're an Iowa State fan, you're kind of hoping you've gotten second place locked up by then, where the Oklahoma game in Norman really doesn't matter. It's just you're playing a game before the championship game. Well, they do host TCU after the Oklahoma game. But I just think Iowa State is primed and ready to challenge Oklahoma. They're going to be focused. You love the talent they have on that team. Matt Campbell is a guy that could have moved on to another job, but he's chosen to stay in Ames and see it through. And another thing too is with all this conference realignment that's been talked about, and rumors where Iowa State's going to end up, I can't help but think this is a dress rehearsal for the Big Ten for them, football wise. So I like the Cyclones a lot. And I really think it's going to be Oklahoma and Iowa State in Dallas for the Big 12 championship.
Well, we'll move on to another team that has a chance at kind of disrupting that 1-2 finish, and that's gonna be probably the Texas Longhorns. Yeah, they've got a new coach. Steve Sarkisian is the guy. He moves over from Alabama, where his offense was virtually unstoppable, but then again, he had a boatload of talent. But he also walks into a Texas situation where they're not lacking for talent on offense either. They got a couple of quarterbacks who can play in Casey Thompson and Hudson Card. But man, Bijan Robinson finished with a ton of rushing yards at the end of the year last year, and they are super deep in that running back room. Could be an interesting time to be a Longhorn. A lot of points potentially put up on the board. The only question is, can they stop anybody?
Well, you got a brilliant offensive mind in Steve Sarkisian taking over at Texas, so they're going to put up points. They're going to look pretty out there. The defense was an issue last year for Texas. Too many times they let. They couldn't make the key stops on third down.
Couldn't make any stops.
Right, and at the point of attack, they were pushed back quite often, which is something I never thought I'd see out of a Texas team. And look, I've been around the University of Texas football since all my life because I'm a child of the Southwest Conference, and I've seen some of the great players they've had on that side of the ball. But Texas is, with everything that's going on with their impending move to the SEC, you gotta kind of feel like they're building toward that. And is a Big 12 championship really? I mean, they've got to do it because they've just been so mediocre at best, really since Mac Brown left. But I'm just wondering, with this impending move into the SEC, is it kind of like a consolation prize? Is it just kind of prove themselves that they can still win a conference championship? You open against Louisiana in Austin. I don't discount that as a complete win.
Yeah, that has trap written all over it.
Because after that, you play the Razorbacks of Arkansas in Fayetteville. Yes, another one of my childhood rivalries back this year. This is why 2021 is going to be a special college football year for me. Arkansas is better than they've been in the last few years under Sam Pittman. So 1-1 is a possibility there, and 0-2, slight possibility, but it's a new coaching staff.
And Billy Napier.
Exactly. And then, after that, really, for the first 5 games for Texas, it's like old home week because they're playing old Southwest Conference rivals. They host Rice and then host Texas Tech, and then they go to TCU. So it's almost like we've brought back the Southwest Conference, right? Before they go to Oklahoma, or play Oklahoma in Dallas at the Red River Shootout, and then you host Oklahoma State. So that's, obviously the Oklahoma game is key. That's a winnable game for them if they've adapted to Steve Sarkisian's offense by then. Mm-hmm. And with the parts that they have on offense, I think by then they're going to have that pretty much down. You could see that as a win for Texas. I just think Oklahoma is so superiorly talented over Texas right now, and their offensive system. It's a great chess match between Steve Sarkisian and Lincoln Riley, which is, I'm looking forward to seeing that game, to watch those two offensive minds go. But after your open day, you got to go to Baylor. You got to go to Iowa State. I think the Iowa State game, they really own Texas. That's going to be a fever pitch in Ames. I just think Iowa State, you have those special teams and that it just seems like good fortune happens to them all the time. That seems like what Iowa State is poised to have this year. Texas to me is number 3 in the pecking order. They're going to be the outside looking in. It's going to ruffle some feathers in Austin. But I just think it's all gearing toward the impending move in the SEC. And because I almost feel like a Big 12 championship would be a consolation prize for Texas right now.
And then really in this conference, you've got those 3 teams kind of on this level. are really the two, Oklahoma and Iowa State on this level, Texas nipping at their heels. And then really after that, it's just kind of for lack of a better way to put it, it's kind of a crapshoot. I mean, you've got a slew of teams in TCU, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, all teams that'll be good, but all teams that aren't quite on that same tier. So we're talking about guys kind of picking up, I don't know if picking up crumbs would be a good way to put it, but this is a different level of college football, isn't it?
Well, it is, but I don't discount Oklahoma State. I kind of like what they've built there in Stillwater and the talent that the mullet has Mike Gundy has assembled there. Spencer Sanders, when he's healthy, can be a next level quarterback, but he gets banged up too many times. Now Chuba Hubbard won't be there this time around, but they've got a couple of running backs, L.D. Brown and Desmond Jackson, that can probably do the same type of production that they got from Chuba Hubbard last year. So, and the other thing too about OSU is, again, you don't talk really defense in the Big 12, but they've done a good job on that side of the ball, getting key stops when they've needed it. But they had COVID issues last year, and they also had some injury issues, and I think that kind of derailed the effort last year. So I don't discount Oklahoma State at all. I don't think they're going to crack into a chance into the championship game, but I think they're going to have a say in who gets in there. And then, I mean, they've got a great start to the season hosting the alma mater, Missouri State, Bobby Petrino, and Tulsa. After that, Boise State's going to be an interesting game. I think they're going to Boise to play on a Smurf turf. That's going to be an interesting game for OSU. Kansas and Baylor at home. So the possibility of being 5-0, but when they hit their open date on October 9th is there. Then it gets brutal because after the open date on October 9th, the next week they go to Texas, and after that they go to Iowa State. That's going to be a brutal part of their schedule for Oklahoma State, and that's what's going to make or break them before they reach to the Bedlam game on November 27th. So I like Oklahoma State probably in a 9-win, maybe 8 wins. And if they pull off an upset, who knows? But I like what Mike Gundy is doing there, and don't discount the chip on their shoulder being with Big Brother Oklahoma saying we're abandoning you in 4 years and going to the SEC. Don't discount that chip on OSU's shoulder. They feel there, and the way they've upgraded their facilities and brought some talent in and had money to be able to do that. They want to play on the same playing field with Oklahoma and Texas, and they feel they're just as good as a program, athletic program and a football program as those guys. So don't discount what that chip on that shoulder might do for them this year.
I really think that the only team that's not playing for fourth place in the conference would be Kansas. And I wish Jada was here so we could kind of have a little bit fun at his expense when it comes to that. But they do have a new coach in Lance Leopold. But they don't really factor into things. Everybody else in this conference has at least a bowl level competitive team. And that's what's going to make it at least somewhat interesting is I guess we're talking about the Big 12 in its final days or its final seasons. Because I don't think they're going to be here when it comes 2025. I don't think the Big 12 is going to exist. But again, it's a whole nother conversation.
Well, I think the one team besides Kansas is going to have a tough go of it. It's probably Texas Tech. Mm-hmm. And I think, Matt Wells, he's going into his third year, and it's just been a disappointing first couple of years for Matt Wells at Texas Tech. I mean, he was hired as an offensive kind of guy. He had Alex Bowman at the time. Injuries really derailed that, and the depth just hasn't been there. So I think it may be a tough go of it in Lubbock this year. But you're right about Kansas. I mean, Lance Leopold just needs to get through the season, his first year, and start trying to find players for 2024, 2025,
or whatever.
and they're playing in the Big Ten,
play.
or insert conference here. But I mean, you open with South Dakota, the Jayhawks do at home. That's probably the one win you can probably chalk up.
Maybe.
Yeah, because you go to Coastal Carolina September 11th, and the Chanticleers beat them in Lawrence last year, and the return game, hey, they're going to get a cool trip to Myrtle Beach out of the deal. Then after that, they play Baylor at home. They go to Duke, go to Iowa State. It's just there's just no wins there for Kansas. And again, the poor football fans in Lawrence. I feel bad for you guys.
But there's always their annual trophy that is the bottom of the barrel winner here on the OSG Sports Dirty Dozen and bottom of the barrel poll that comes out weekly during the college football season, where we rank the top 12 and the bottom 5 teams in college football. And Kansas probably has an honorary position there in that bottom 5. I don't think that's going to change.
So you've got them at the bottom in your preseason poll.
Yeah. I think they're number 128 out of 128. But that's another story for another time. Wilkie, we could go on here if you want. We could talk a little bit about Confusa, Conference USA, or we kind of wrap it up and we could just roll the Confusa folks into next week's show.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's roll them into next week.
Okay.
We love Conference USA.
Plus, it gives us something to promote for next week where we can talk Conference USA. We can talk a whole bunch more college football previews. As the countdown to kickoff continues, we're roughly 2 weeks away from the first games of the college football season. So stay tuned. We got a lot to talk about in the next couple of weeks. And God knows, every single week it seems like some other crazy story about realignment or something like that comes up. So that'll give us, again, plenty of shit to talk about.
Yes, it will.
That being said, let's go ahead and sign off. Thanks for sticking around, folks. You've made it through about an hour of us talking college football here on The Review. It's the OSG Sports College Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you find us on social media at OSG Sports. Find him you can find Wilkie somewhere, even though he's not on Twitter. But I guess that's another conversation.
Yeah.
At OSG Phil, or you can just tweet us at OSG Sports. Chances are one of us will respond. Ask a question. Let us know what you think. We're around. You're around. We're all around. Time to say goodbye because I'm running out of cliches to talk about. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will be back again, and next week, hopefully, we'll have the entire squad here. For Brother Wilkie, I am Brother Phil. We are the Online Sports Guys. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.